Democratic strategist Steve Schale. Thanks for talking to us.
Thank you.
You're fresh off the Barack Obama victory. Now you're working for Dan Gelber's U.S. Senate campaign.
Yeah.
Does it not seem like already this early Kendrick Meek is leaving Gelber behind? All these Bill Clinton visits, these big endorsements like SEIU?
Well, listen, I think if we judge campaigns based on the first month, we'd be talking about former President Phil Gramm and people like that. Listen, I mean, this is a long slog. Obviously, Congressman Meek has some institutional advantages he's been able to take advantage of, but I feel like Dan Gelber's life story, his biography, his service is the kind that will resonate up and down the I-4 corridor. We feel very good about our first month, and I really believe that as the campaign goes forward, we're going to be in a good shape.
So let's say, hypothetically, Charlie Crist jumps over to the Senate. Suddenly there's an open governor's race. Maybe Bill McCollum gets in there. Do we rule out Gelber switching what he's running for, maybe
Listen,
Attorney General?
The one thing I love about Dan Gelber is he's sort of had this dream. He's a very modest guy, doesn't talk about it a lot. But Dan Gelber, I think, has wanted to serve in the U.S. Senate ever since he served for Sam Nunn back in the 90s. And listen, it takes a lot of courage to be a state senator from an urban core to run for the United States Senate, especially relative unknown. But I think Dan is in this thing, Charlie Crist or no Charlie Crist, and I may be one of the few people out there who actually would love the idea of a matchup with Crist. I think I'd love to have a good debate in this state about where we've been and where we need to go and the leadership that the Governor Crist has provided.
What's the argument? A guy with 60-70% approval ratings, everybody seems to be basically convinced he's unbeatable either for Senate or governor. What's the case to be made against him?
Double-digit unemployment in the state, basically no growth, education system, hardly any changes at all. Governor Crist, I think, is a fantastically nice man. He's always been very kind to me when I've met him. But listen, this state and this country deserves real leadership, and it's sort of hard to argue that when it comes to leadership or no leadership, Governor Crist has chosen the route of the most politically expedient route, not the kind of route that gets where we need to go.
A lot of buzz about Barack Obama 2.0 and
Yeah.
what that might mean for Florida Democrats. Is it hype, all this talk that there may be dozens of field staffers added to the state party?
Well, the last time I heard about hype related to Barack Obama, it was Jim Greer talking about how our campaign was a phantom operation that wasn't going to actually exist. So I think I would encourage people who think that Obama 2.0 is hype to look at a record here in Florida. Listen, I mean, I think the Obama folks understand very well the math to become president again in 2012 and going forward. Florida's going to have 28, 29 electoral votes in the next redistricting. We win Florida again in 2012. Barack Obama's going to be president for 8 years. So I think you'll see a significant presence with Obama 2.0 here on the ground. Exactly what that looks like, I think they're still working out in Washington and Chicago, but I think it'll be significant, and I think it'll be groundbreaking. I mean, just like the campaign really brought a whole new level of activism to Florida. The whole goal of Obama 2.0 is to keep these activists involved, and encourage them to get involved in community service and helping down ballot races and really creating a core of activists that can help us in the next decade, quite honestly, just as Jeb Bush did in Florida back in 1998.
Well, is there any reason to think, without Obama on the ballot, that even with that extra field staff, you can replicate or come close to replicating some of those, especially the amazing early voting numbers that Obama...
I would never say that we can replicate Barack Obama, but I do think there are skill sets that we learned and we taught in the last campaign that are replicable in future elections. And I think, listen, I mean, the terrain of the state and the trend lines of the state I feel very good about. And I think when you look going into the next decade, we have a very good shot of getting the majority on the cabinet, adding more Democrats in the state legislature and Congress. And what we've lacked in the past is having that really solid, active volunteer base that I think we are now beginning to grow thanks to Barack Obama. So I'm very optimistic, in the words of Governor Crist, about the next decade in Florida.
And let's talk about redistricting. Assuming, who knows how the redistricting ballot initiative goes, but
Yeah.
assuming that's not a factor, given the Republican advantage in the legislature, are Democrats screwed for redistricting?
Sure. I'd love to have 76 members and draw the map, but I would remind folks that in 1992 was basically the event that led to the Republicans being the majority today in terms of the map that came out of that cycle. And there were 46 Republicans in the state house at that point. There is no more self-interested process in all of politics than redistricting and reapportionment. If we're able to have some good gains in 2010, able to be unified as a caucus in both the House and the Senate, I believe we can come out of this with a map that at least is more fair. I also think that demographics in this state are evolving regardless of party. And when you look at where the state was 10 years ago, where it's going to be 10 years from now, Republicans can't run from these demographic shifts. So I think the map coming out of 2010, it may not be the map that I would draw, but I think it'll be a map that will allow for some competitive elections going forward.
Does it matter that the Justice Department is now controlled by a Democratic president in terms of redistricting?
It's nice to have friends in Washington.
Steve Schale, thanks a lot.